grew up where my parents, I was an only child, had no brothers or sisters around. I started mowing lawns, started knocking on doors in San Bernardino.
Yeah.
That was my first endeavor. I have a wife who I met when I was 17 years old and coming off of drugs. We ended up having a son out of wedlock. I got to be a provider. My why is partnering with people to help them become successful.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that my success is your success. Hello, my name's Ray Blom, and welcome back to Business by the Book, where our faith intersects with our businesses and life in every area, and where we learn that any principle that's good comes from God and His holy word. Whether you know Him or not, these principles come from the holy word of God. So today, we're going to flip the podcast. After the last one, we had a couple reach out and say, well, why Business by the Book? What's Ray's why behind Business by the Book? So Gary Hornsby, who I interviewed for our first podcast, is now going to flip it on me and interview me and my why. So
Yeah.
Welcome back, Gary.
Oh, it's my honor. And and one of those people is my wife.
Yeah.
You know, after she watched our video, she said, she goes, you know what? What about Ray's story? People need to know Ray's story because why is he doing the podcast? Why is it important to him? And the passion that you have, just your life and how you're pouring into people. And so it's great for me to be able to ask you some questions and let you tell your God story of why you do what you do and what God's doing in your life. And you've got a long history of business and training and ministry now, and you've got reaching out and touching a lot of people's lives. So so tell me, how'd you get into, when did you own your own first business? Tell me your...
Well, my first legitimate business, but before that, I started with what we would call side hustles.
Yeah.
So didn't graduate high school. I grew up where my parents, I was an only child. So I didn't have, my parents divorced when I was like 6 or 7. Had no brothers or sisters around. My dad ended up, doing his life. My mom was kind of in her world. So for me, figuring out life was through other people.
Yeah.
And so, sharing what I learned became very important. It's part of what we're doing with Business by the Book.
Right.
Mentorship became very important, which is also something we hope to do through Business by the Book. If I can have guests that share what's good, but also the things they've done that weren't so good, that's the best way to learn. The School of Hard Knocks is probably the toughest school and the most expensive one.
Well, and where you had your School of Hard Knocks was in a hard city too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where you grew up in.
Which is another important why for me, San Bernardino.
Right.
My hometown, which, for many years when I was growing up was an all-American city.
Right.
It was a great place. I left during the stint of junior high and came back my senior of high school, and it had changed. It was a different city. And I still loved it, but it wasn't the same San Bernardino I grew up in. So that's another one of my whys behind this, because if we can help spurn successful business here in San Bernardino, and those principles work here, they're going to work anywhere. Because we've been one of the most challenged cities in the United States. At one point, we were the second poor largest city in the nation. We were the murder capital per capita of the nation. We filed bankruptcy as a municipality. So San Bernardino's had a lot of things working against it, but my heart was still drawn back here. And my other why was, I kind of shared that a little bit too, is I was an only child. So the thing that eluded me most of my life was family. So the most important thing I was going to do was, when I started my family, do everything that I didn't have,
Right.
and be different. And well, I tried my best. It didn't always work out like planned.
Now that you're mentioning your family, so you have a wife and 2 boys, right?
I have a wife who I met when I was 17 years old and coming off of drugs.
Yeah.
And she never did drugs, but I did through periods of life during pain. And by the time I was 19, we weren't married. I didn't go to church or anything. She had given her heart to the Lord at 14, but then life took her away from that first love. And when we met, neither one of us was in a great place, but we fell in love here in San Bernardino. We ended up having a son out of wedlock. And my heart then changed from, having fun, doing whatever I wanted. I got to be a father.
Right.
I got to be a provider. And I want to be a husband. So we started talking about marriage, and our only goal at the time was, can we get a little apartment for us and our son in a decent area of San Bernardino? That was the only goal or plan we had. Didn't know how we were going to get there. I had no career path at the time. I was coming off of drugs, and she was working as a medical assistant. Something I will say about my wife, she was the first baby of 16, the first one to ever graduate high school in her family and start a career. So God was using her to break some things off before we even knew it. Right? So that's part of it. And then the business side of it, I went into that because as I started working, I was always trying to make side income, try to find better my family. My why was family.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a career path at one point. And as I found a career path, I always wanted to make, I was entrepreneurial.
Yeah. When did you feel like because there's a point when that entrepreneurial mindset, or you start seeing yourself differently, or just like, I just can't see myself doing this. I really feel like compelled to, you know how it gets when your mind starts working that way. You start thinking about it. You start making plans, strategizing, not quite sure how it's all going to work out. How old were you when you started thinking that way?
Probably about 8 or 9.
Yeah.
I remember my first entrepreneurial endeavor. I was living on 16th in Paris in San Bernardino. My mom was, my mom was a single mom. We lived with her sister. She worked enough to, feed me and provide some basic needs, but no extra frills. My dad would come in and out of my life. When he was there, it was great. We'd have fun, and he'd buy me stuff, but then he'd disappear again. My grandma would try to, get me things here and there. But so I started mowing lawns. I got a lawnmower, started knocking on doors in San Bernardino and mowing lawns.
Yeah.
That was my first endeavor. And then I went and knocked on restaurants on Highland Avenue and said, can I pick up trash or clean up? And while they wouldn't pay me, they gave me free food.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. But then after that, it was newspaper routes. So I was always from a young kid. Right. But then when I got married, I was always looking for, how do I grow so I can someday provide better for my family? And I tried probably, I don't know, if you talk to my wife, it might be more, but I'd say 12, 13 side hustles, anything from multi-level marketing, Amway, to, just working through others, starting little landscape things. I'm not a mechanic guy, but if I help get the accounts and you do the work, we can build something together. So I was always, trying to partner up with guys that had different talents and skills than me and do that. But my first real endeavor was starting a construction company. I left a career path. I was working for a contractor school and got my general contractor's license. And one of the guys that lived on my block, we went to the same church. We had bought our first house. This is much later. And he came through the school, got his license. I had my license. And it just made sense for us to partner.
Is this the school that you used to have, or is this?
No, I used to work. This was before I started it.
All right, so all the schools that you have came later on.
Came late after this endeavor.
Right, you got exposed to that and saw the opportunity.
Yeah, but I wanted to honor my word.
Right.
When I built their school and took it to the #1 school in the state and left them in a better place with a model that was very sustainable, but I was bored. Yeah. And that entrepreneurial spirit comes out, and money wasn't my drive, although it was a nice tool to have. Yeah. But boredom I was like, I can't sit here for the money. I've got to go build something. I want a new challenge. And that's
Challenge. That's the word that's coming
the
to
new
my
challenge. Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
So we started a construction company, and in theory, it was going to work out great. He was going to he was a tradesman, and I was the businessman. I was going to do the marketing, the compliance, help with the office, whatever we needed, and he was going to run the field. And we grew, and then I learned this thing on the importance of culture and written agreements and roles, and because we had just talked loosely about roles.
Yeah.
But when we got busy in the field, he wanted me to become a plumber, and I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to that. So against my better judgment, I agreed to it. My wife tried to warn me before we started the business. Then she saw where it was going, and she said, I don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, I'm going to make it work.
So this is the part of the interview right here where he's trying to give you some really good advice about going into partnerships. And ironically, Ray and I are also partners today in several different endeavors as well. But partnerships are great, but they are very high risk. So you really got to find the right partner and make sure you're like-minded and your passions and your whys are very similar. Otherwise, expectations are not met because one person has a different why than another one. And if two people have two different kind of whys, it's hard for them to go down the same road because why they're going on their journey is for different reasons. And so Ray's giving you some good advice right now, so listen up.
Yeah, I was a pretty young Christian.
Yeah.
And, they talked about being equally yoked, so I thought we're both Christians. We both like each other. We're friends. It should work out great. We're equally yoked. Well, I found out equally yoked means a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Right? And so we weren't equally yoked. And I ended up walking away from that, and I gave him the company because I wasn't going to fight. I don't fight over money. His friendship meant more to me than the money. And unfortunately, it still cost us the friendship. And that was probably one of my biggest, regrets because we had a great relationship. And my wife tried to warn me.
Yeah. And how old were you at this time?
I was 20, gosh, man, I came 24. I was probably in my early 30s.
Yeah, okay.
That's probably my 30s when I started my first endeavor, probably around 30 years old.
All right.
And first full-time, not the side hustle.
Right.
This is where I left my career, went full-time into business.
Right.
It's probably about 30 years old, maybe 29.
Yeah. Good.
And
you did that for how long?
Well, ever since.
No, I'm talking about that one
We
experience.
were there. We were partners probably about almost 2 years.
Okay.
And we had built it up. We got contracts with Lowe's. When Lowe's came into Southern California, we had property management contracts.
So what was the principle in that experience that you learned? What was the nugget of wisdom that that you landed on? Like, man, that really taught me.
Yeah. Well, I think you already alluded to it.
Yeah.
How difficult partnerships truly are.
Right.
I say, marriage is a partnership for life, right? In every area. And that's difficult. When you love somebody and you want to do life with them, it's still a difficult road. Now you bring two people together with the commonality, really making money together in a partnership is a big part of why we do business together. And that makes it even more difficult. And, money's not don't get me wrong, I want to be profitable in all that I do, but it's never been my why. Yeah. I walked away from good money and an easy career to build something that was much more difficult.
So tell me, because we've mentioned a few times now about what your why is, what is your why? Would you sum up this thing? And when did you realize it was your why? Yeah. Is it something you learned later on? You look back and you're like, I think this motivates me, or was it clear to you early on?
Well, part of it was clear early on.
Okay.
My why's always been people, but it started off with my wife and kids.
Right.
Those were the people. They were my why.
Yeah.
That I was willing to work hard and sacrifice to get ahead because I wanted them to have everything I didn't have. Right. I wanted them to have experiences, security, a home, all the things that I didn't have growing up consistently. So, but I think it's been in the last couple years that my why's become real clear. And my why is really helping, partnering with people to help them become successful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that my success is your success.
Right.
And that's my why. It started off with family, but it spread into, and now I look back, when even growing up in a tough part of San Bernardino or different seasons, when I got something good or learned something good, I wanted to share it with those around me.
Yeah, no, me and you are so alike like that. We're both wired that way. It's just in us. We can't help it. If we feel like something works, something good, that's the good reason why we're doing what we're doing right now, is because if we have these kind of conversations, or sometimes when we're in a group and we're sitting at a table, we find out that the people at the table are gaining wisdom from Ray and I having conversations like this, and we're inspiring young business owners, entrepreneurs, and we're helping them along in their journey and helping them along in life. And so we thought, well, we can do it to a table of 8 people maybe, or we can do videos like this and be able to just send a link and share it with somebody. So if anything that we're talking about, or Business by the Book, any of the videos they have, you find them helpful, just copy the link and send it to people. And that's what the whole purpose of this is for, so we can, hopefully people can learn from the mistakes we made and also catch on to some of the things we did right. And maybe you might find the peace and joy that we have when you find your why, and even more so when you find a relationship with the Lord, and then He begins to reveal to you through His Spirit your purposes and the plans He has for your life. And I know I want to take you into the next part of your business stuff, and then we'll get to the reason of that big dent in your head right there, because I know there's a good story behind that. So after your 30s, then what was that next little season that you went into?
Yeah, well, after, that partnership ended, and while there was money made, it wasn't successful on the people side of it, so it didn't feel successful. I went and the general manager that hired me for the other contractor school had left because of the culture didn't mesh, and that's one of the reasons I ended up leaving too. The CEO had different values than I did, and the other GM that had hired me ended up leaving, starting his own school in Burbank, and kept trying to recruit me because he saw the success I had to be his partner. And I just left a bad partnership. But what I had told him, he was trying to recruit me out of the school, and I had signed a non-compete. And he said, Ray, they're not valid in California. He'd done the legal research. But I said, you know what? I know it's not valid, but it was my word. Right. And everybody else that's left this owner has stolen something from him when they left, because they went right into the same industry. I don't want to be that guy. So while I don't have to honor it, I'm going to stay out of the industry 1 year. And I wanted to go start a construction company, and I did. But after that failed a couple years later, then I reached out to him.
You're faced with, right there, you're faced with as a young man, you're faced with that was integrity issues. Yeah. Okay, what kind of reputation do I want long term? What do I want to be known for? When people say my name, what are they going to associate that with? And so that was an important part of your growth there.
And there's a side story about that, and it played out, and it reaffirmed that how important integrity is in business and life. And what had happened was 2 years later, I called him up. And I finally, there's a whole story behind that, but about 1.5 years later, we were able finally to get my location, my first school, off the ground, in partnership with, actually it became my original partner's family, because he passed away as we were trying to get my school off the ground. But I got the school going, and it was successful. And I was doing really well. And one day I got a call from my manager, and he said, the general manager of your old employer is here, and they're saying that the owner is threatening a lawsuit against us because he feels that we copied his model. So I said, okay, well, tell him I'll be back in a little bit. And I smiled, because I knew that I had stayed out of the industry 2 years.
Yeah.
So I honored not only my non-compete for 1 year, but I stayed out 2 years. And it ended up being 3.5 because of the like to get the school off the ground with the state and everything else. So I called up the general manager, we met, and I said, David, you know that I didn't do that because I stayed out. I honored my non-compete when I didn't have to. And he smiled. He goes, yeah, he goes, if I'm being honest, the owner knows that. And he said, you're the first one that's ever done that. We were out here just to check your school out. There was really no, because they knew I had honored it and then some. So my reputation, my witness was still good, even though I was now their competitor.
Right.
So the integrity means a lot. It always does.
So you had how many locations of the schools?
We ended up growing to 5 locations. We had a chain
locations.
throughout Southern California.
Yeah, that's a lot to.
Yeah.
You start getting multiple locations. That adds a whole other dynamic to your business. And sometimes when we're young, we think, you know what? If I make this much in this location, all I need is 5 or 10 more, and then I can make this much. But it takes a whole different level of management and systems in order to do that, because it's you just can't take the model of managing one and think that same model is going to manage multiple locations. Everything's got to be tweaked some.
Well, and the misnomer was this: before I went and started, my contracting company, my first full-time endeavor, I had worked at that contractor school. Before that, I had built a career path from a side job at Circuit City Corporation. And I had rose up from a seasonal warehouse worker to customer service to sales into management. And that's when they're in the book From Good to Great. So I got the training of a great company, their culture, their systems, everything. So I had managed one of their most successful stores out in Palm Springs. And I got that training before I left and went out of corporate America into
so that transition.
So I had actually managed much bigger budgets and systems and stuff than when I had my 5 locations. The difference was, and this is I hadn't built the systems. I had managed existing systems. And there's a big difference when you're already doing the business and it's busy and you hit a ceiling and there's not the right systems in place. Now you got to keep going with the existing chaos while you work twice as hard to build out systems and then retrain your whole staff. And when we had multiple locations, it became an endeavor. But we got through it.
And a good point you're reading, the 2 words that you're using also is builder and maintainer, right? And we realize there's some guys can be great builders, but they're not content in the maintaining of it. And so some guys are visionaries, they're going to help build it, bring it up, but being there long term to maintain it. And other guys come in and man, I can run this system. You build it, I can run it like it's supposed to be ran. And so, if you're watching this, it's good to know yourself. Am I a builder or am I a person that likes to manage systems and operate in that thing? And not, they both serve their purpose in the business world. And sometimes if you're one or the other, you got strengths and you got weaknesses. So try to know yourself and say, what am I really leaning towards? And then surround yourself with other people that have good input to put into to shore up your weak points, because that's quite the
That's a good
endeavor.
point, because I'm not a maintainer.
Yeah.
I love to build and release,
Right.
either to a partner, sell, hand off, whatever it is, because once it's done, that boredom comes over me.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the challenge and the growth that I love.
All right. In this next little season, I know you had gotten your next partner was.
Well, the schools kind of crumbled for 2 things. When we had built successful systems, making money, and I rested. As the leader of the organization, I decided to take a year off from all my hard work and enjoy life. I had management in place. I had systems in place. Everything was going good. And then the leader, the visionary, always has to be looking at what's next or what's coming. I took a break.
Right.
Well, you don't get to take a break as the leader of an organization for a year, because a law change happened. About half of our income came through vocational rehab. This was when Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected as governor.
Yeah.
And he reformed the work comp system. Well, it eliminated the retraining benefit for vocational schools through the Voc Rehab, Department of Rehab, which was a good chunk of our income. Some schools went out of business. I survived. I ended up selling 2 locations off for a fraction of what I could have got at the height, holding on to 3. And then what happened nearly just right after that, a 1-2 punch. So then Ray thought, I'm going to take a third out of my house and get an SBA loan to rebuild after I had sold 2 because the law changed.
Yeah.
I was going to try to outgrow it. Took a third out of my property, and then 2008 happens.
Yeah. I think, 2008, 2007, 8, and 9, I think there's a lot of, if you're, in your 50s right now, you probably got your story of things that probably happened in your industry and stuff like that. But what the other lesson is that you're talking about there, it's an important lesson too, is when we're used to being successful and a business is taking hits and it starts going in the wrong direction, sometimes it's really hard for us because I went through the same thing. I'd never really failed at any business before. So next thing you know, through that same season, selling stocks, I was selling off all this stuff thinking, well, just next month. That's a horrible place to be in because then you're taking out a third on your house. And, we just, looking back, it's like, man, if you would have just bailed on that sooner, you could have been so much smarter. So that's a little nugget of wisdom right there is know the signs or talk to people, get the signs. And, sometimes it's not good just to overextend yourself trying to save the business. So
you say it. Don't try to be the hero of the story.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus is my hero.
Yeah.
And when I try to be the hero, I end up making messes sometimes. So looking back, I should have reset,
And that's where they go.
regrouped.
If you're in a pit, right?
Yeah.
God's trying to pull you out, but we got a shovel that says, no, I got this. I'll dig
myself out of the pit. Yeah. So anyway, that was that season.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't, my next chapter wasn't out of want, it was out of need.
Right.
We had 3 locations that were struggling. I could hardly pay. I was going through, they had the modifications going in 2008, 2009, trying to modify my home to keep it.
Right.
And I had known of a guy who later became my partner, but we had done business from a distance because I owned contractors' schools and we'd start up with the corporations and do all this. But the insurance I would always refer out, and I referred him to this place called the Corporate Advocate. They had an insurance brokerage. They were tax accountants. So 2008 hit. My clients are all in construction, overnight,
Right.
gone. His clients were construction and real estate, overnight, gone. They were in Rancho, had a 10,000 square foot executive offices with like 20 accountants. One day, the next time I look at them, the family's packing up and moving home.
Wow.
Right? Going through bankruptcy, looking at, barely making it. And I said, well, guys, I have 3 schools. I'm barely making it. Why don't you jump into mine and let's work together to survive? And that's how me and my new partner, we helped each other when we had no money. Some of my remaining clients needed some tax accounting. We'd do some consulting, whatever we could just to try to pay our mortgage payments and the rents of the locations. But out of that, we were both into insurance, mine for bonds, his for insurance. And we ended up rebuilding into my current model today, which is a commercial insurance brokerage specializing in workers' compensation.
Right. It's amazing what gets birthed out of those seasons, right? It not only changes you as a business owner or a human, right, going through those type of things, but also it just gives you opportunity, really. When you get that desperate about how to survive, sometimes opportunity has a way of showing up in ways that you never would have thought. You never
get more creative than normal.
Yeah. So you survived through that time with Corporate Advocate, built in a partnership. Things started going really well for you. And what's up with the bump on your head?
Yeah. Well, just going back to that, if I can,
before
we get to, I know you're anxious for the bump.
Well,
I threw out the heart, so you can throw out the bump.
I know the story.
But what I will say, and another why, and I say this, going back to what's important to me, what I fell in love with my school model, and then I started coaching my businesses, was helping people become successful. Right. I loved that. What I didn't like was the financial model was when they couldn't afford me and I couldn't afford them, it all fell apart,
Mm.
right? Because education,
Yeah.
coaching, consulting costs money.
Right.
And they were barely trying to hold their businesses. When they needed me the most, they couldn't afford me and I couldn't afford them.
Mm.
So I was trying to give away as much time as I could, but I'd go home and my wife's like, how are we going to pay the mortgage?
Right.
Right? So it tore me. But my why, and
Because
I
I
thought,
think, let's clarify a little bit there, because in your model of corporate advocate, you not only took care of the risk management part of some of these corporations, but you really came alongside some of these CEOs and these people and helped them with their businesses, right?
we grew into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way we got there is my first love. Joey was a enrolled agent, a tax accountant.
Yeah.
I'm a educator, business coach. And so we both loved helping business owners and we both got paid well to do it. When the economy fell apart, we moved into brokers to help with work comp because work comp was sky high.
Right.
And we were trying to save some clients and we got creative and we got into professional employee organizations, alternative work comp solutions, and we started to make money. And while I was making money, my heart was still for the small business, the ones that were failing and dying, but they didn't make
Right.
me any money.
Right.
The big businesses made me money, the little ones, not so much. And
Right.
they needed a whole lot more help.
Right.
So we developed a small business model that would wrap up their work comp, their payroll, their consulting, compliance, all under our corporate advocate umbrella.
Right.
That paid us enough that I could work with my first love, which was helping the small guy
Right.
in a sustainable model. And what I found was what the insurance brokerage allowed me to do was educate and consult for low cost or no cost to my clients. Most brokers get paid really well to broker insurance and services, but they take their clients to play golf once a year or do stuff like that. We now were able to use our first love of helping businesses grow and stay sustainable because we made money through their insurances. So now we could go back and do education and consulting for low cost, no cost. And when our clients stayed in business, we stayed in business. And when they grew, we grew with them.
Yeah.
So we were able, instead of leaving my first love to come into insurance, which I initially thought, it actually gave me a sustainable model to use insurance to help my clients grow.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing too is that you're in that process, you're also redefining. Well, you'll go through stages in business where what you view as success will get changed. You'll be challenged on that because as a young owner or something like that, sometimes you base all your success on, the bottom line, the money stuff, the material stuff. You get caught up in that. Our culture that we live in, it of course drives us to view our successes that way. But as you grow and as you mature and you really find your whys and why you want to do this, so if you can find yourself, here you were looking to how can I really feel successful, and it wasn't money driven.
Mm-mm.
You weren't driven by money. You were driven with this desire to help people. So, sometimes in that kind of environment, you can go to work and maybe not make any money that day and come home and the wife can say, hey, how was your day? You say, man, it was a great day. Oh, you made a lot of money today? No, I didn't make any money, but it was very successful.
Yeah.
And that is that piece that comes that is just a whole other level. And some people miss out on it because they're so driven
By money.
but by the other perception of success, right? But when you find the real version of success, man, it really changes the way we run our businesses.
It does. And it's funny how when you take care of other people, your needs are always met.
Yeah.
There's always a principle behind that. So,
okay, so in this story now, are we getting closer to this?
yeah, we found success. We found financial success. I was able to give my family everything I didn't have growing up. Houses, cars, vacations. And it seemed like the more I gave my family, the more broken we became. And along the way, I had come to the Lord in 1994, a young Christian, made mistakes. And I didn't even know you can get church hurt. Yeah. I had gotten church hurt along the way. Slowly, I love God, but I started not loving church so much and started church hopping, did a lot of different ministry, different places. But slowly, we always talk about in the Christian world that, you know, what we put before God, drugs, alcohol, all the bad stuff. Mine was a little different. Mine was family. Remember I said my why was my family?
Mm-hmm.
So when I got hurt and I quit going to church and I tried to love God on my own terms, I just took care of my family. And I bought them whatever they wanted. I sent for private school. My wife would complain about cleaning the house, I'd hire a maid. Yeah. We did, and then our kids grew up. I put soccer and family first. We had great friends. Everything on the outside looked good, but something on the inside was still not right in Ray. Mm-hmm. I was helping people, and I was providing for my family, and I was still missing something in my life. Mm. And I didn't understand what it was, but I started to suffer, first, chronic kidney stones. I would get a kidney stone. It would come on. The first time I got a kidney stone, the pain is ridiculous. After 2 weeks of being on the couch, they finally did surgery to blow it up because it was lodged, and I thought, okay, I'm over that. It was painful. I'm done. I started passing them chronically. But part of this is Ray's stubborn. Ray likes to make things work. I had to learn how to be a survivor from a young age and make things work. Your strongest attribute, unsubmitted to God, becomes your strongest curse. Right. So I could make things work. And pain wasn't going to deter me. Pass a kidney stone, be coaching a soccer game, go to the ER, pass it, come back and finish the tournament. It was painful, but I wasn't going to stop. It didn't slow me down. And the doctors couldn't explain why I was passing kidney stones. It was crazy. I was passing uric acid kidney stones, but my uric acid levels were normal. Mm. And they would do an MRI and say, okay, you got no more kidney stones, you're good. Usually it takes months to form a kidney stone. A couple weeks later, I'm passing another kidney stone. It got to the point where I was a professional kidney stone passer. My wife and kids just knew, Dad's passing the kidney stone. When it gets so bad, we'll just take him to the emergency. And so ignored it. I was still trying to make it work on my own. Then come to the next season, my kids are grown, leaving, and this was about 2015, 16, made more money than I ever dreamed of. Me and my wife didn't know each other like we once did when we fell in love. We had raised kids, we had found success, but we had become almost roommates. And the more I tried to fix my wife, the more depressed she became, the more distant we became from each other, the more frustrated I became. But we were still, we never fought about money or anything like that, but we couldn't make our marriage really work the way I wanted it. When I want to do something, I want it to be all in. And I wanted that marriage so bad. And we were 27 years. God had saved our marriage when I came to the Lord the first time. He saved my marriage then. And I said, I'm going to always stay married. You're going to keep my marriage together, God. I'll never be like my dad. Yeah. And here I am, now kids are gone, grown, and we can't revive our spark. And I started getting chronic headaches. And they couldn't tell me what was wrong. They kept saying stress. I'm not stressed, guys. I don't stress. No, it's stress. Finally, I was going to the doctors and they kept trying to give me pain pills and stuff. And I was like, I don't do this. And my wife was getting more frustrated. She'd go with me and she kept asking for more HMO. Make a long story short, we were at Victoria Gardens one day. And this was, I think, in early 2016 or late 2015. And I got disoriented. I didn't know where I was at. The pain had gotten worse. They took me to the ER in Redlands. And the ER did an MRI. And they sent it to my doctor. And before I know it, they said there's something wrong. And they said, you need to go see surgeons at Loma Linda. And they had told me that I had been born with the condition, it was similar to hydrocephalus, which is water in the brain. Basically, there was spinal fluid building up in the brain that wouldn't drain. It was causing pressure against the brain, causing headaches and disoriented. And they said, we're going to have to do surgery. And they had to have a pediatric neurosurgeon and a regular neurosurgeon because they dealt with this condition when you were born, not at 40-something years old. And so, but it didn't faze me. I was a president of the soccer league. I had found success. I just wanted to get through the surgery so I could get back to my life. My family was freaked out. I'm having brain surgery. They're saying he could lose his memory. And I was thinking, get it over with so I can get back to life. So they did the surgery and they give me a choice. Do you want to put a shunt in, which is a drip line, and you'll see a little bubble in your neck, or do you want to poke a hole in it, perforate it, and hope it doesn't come back? I said, poke a hole and hope it doesn't come back. I don't want a line going down my neck. Right. Came out of surgery, didn't lose my memory, went back to life. But the more, and I didn't even follow doctor's directions. I was so stubborn. And the more I tried to fix my marriage, the worse it got. So the last ditch effort was first of all, it was in that was in 15, 16. By 2017, and they had told me, if we perforate it, it might block again, and then we'll have to redo surgery, and then we'll put a shunt. Well, 2017, it came back. And so I'm like, okay, I got to go get the shunt. And this time, it took me, got back to Loma Linda. They finally, after going through the rigmarole again, saw the surgeon and they go, it's not the same thing. You don't have hydrocephalus this time. You have something called pseudotumor cerebri. It's different. So what do you mean it's different? They told me.
Right.
And they said, this condition, we really don't have any answers for. If we've tried surgery and it left somebody worse than when they came into the surgery. So we won't do it until it's a last resort. And oh, by the way, you might be blind someday. When you're getting near blindness and you're getting to where you're incoherent, we'll try surgery then. And I was in shock. I'm a very positive. Faith is one of my principles that I live by. It's going to get better because my life, at this point, I got to a very dark place. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel full of faith. I was frustrated. My marriage was broken. My kids were doing their own thing. And now they couldn't fix. And they were telling me I'm probably going to be brain dead or blind before they'll even try to help me. Wow. And money couldn't fix it. So I got into a dark place. And me and my wife went on an all-expense paid first-class trip to Europe to try to reignite our spark. And when we came back, and we had started going to the Way World Outreach. And I remember when we got back from Europe, we were still broken. So the most romantic place in the world, first class couldn't fix what was broken inside of us. We got back, we went to the Way World Outreach, and it was crazy because God had even moved it closer to my house. We had gone when it was on Sierra Way, but I was church jumping, and I found a reason I didn't like it. So we were sitting there because I was losing faith really quick. And I remember Pastor Marco saying they were going to start marriage thing, and it could be what saves your marriage. I looked at my wife. This was in early 2017. I said, do you want to go? She goes, no. I said, okay. And we ended up splitting up after 27 years of marriage. And I started living YOLO. I was going to be dead and blind. I was depressed. I was angry. It was crazy because even my family, my wife moved out. My bank accounts were on her. We never separated money. It was never that. And I got dark, and I started looking at other people, other women, and fantasizing about being cared for and loved because I didn't feel it in my marriage no more. And I just got into a dark place. And before I knew it, I had a covenant I had kept when God had given me my marriage back so many years before I broke. And I knew my life was over. My marriage was over. My family was over. All I had was money. And so I started not going to the doctors and slowly planning. My plan was to go back to Oregon, where I'd lived as a young man when my parents divorced for a couple years.
Yeah.
They had a assisted living suicide, and I was going to die on my terms. I was going to hire a nurse to come in and kill me and leave my money to my wife and kids and be done with life. And that was my plan. But God intervened through my wife. I ended up getting to Baltimore, Maryland. God met me there. I got a supernatural healing that they couldn't even explain at Johns Hopkins, who's a brain center. And God brought me back and restored my marriage. And what was crazy was when they did my surgery for my brain, my hairline was down here. They had to shave it. And because of my stubbornness and God meeting me, and He had to allow me to get so broken that I was willing to take my life. When He met me in a city through strangers I had never been before, and I just told God, I just want you. I'm tired. And He healed me in my heart. He healed my brain. He healed my marriage. He's healed my family. And He's given me my purpose back, which we're talking about today.
Right.
But this scar is my testimony, because I was so stubborn that I could make things work. I could make my marriage work. I could make my family work. I could make any business work. I could find my own success. And what I learned is without God, there is no success.
What He's sharing with you now is one of the most, of course, obviously the most life transforming things that any of us go through in life is when we just come to that place where we're at the end of ourselves. Because as you heard his testimony, Ray, he was good at controlling things and managing things, but things happen in life. He couldn't control what's happening to him physically. Next thing you know, his marriage was out of sorts. And so he came to the place where he got into a really dark place. And maybe you're watching this today and you're finding yourself and you feel like you're in a pit. You're in a dark place and you're feeling hopeless. And a testimony like Ray's today is letting you know that, when you're in that place, there's someone you can cry out to, and it's Jesus. And you heard Ray say earlier, though, He is the hero of our stories. He's the one that pulled me out of my pits. He's the one that pulled you out of your pits, and He'll pull you out of your pit. And there's Psalms 41-3 says, I cried out to the Lord, and He heard my cry. He brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and He set my feet upon a rock, and He established my goings, and He put a new song in our mouth. Many shall see it and hear, but their trust in the Lord. So what were some of the lyrics of your new song that you began to sing on the other side of that after you came out of this dark place, this dark pit? What were the new things coming out of Ray's mouth? What were the new things Ray was saying? What were the things that you learned? How did God transform you and bring you to where you're at today and doing this podcast?
Well, the first thing I learned is that there's nothing impossible for God. Yeah. My marriage shouldn't be today, but we're now celebrating 34 years of marriage this year. My wife's my best friend. We have just joy together, love, everything I ever wanted, God's brought. Right. My family's restored and growing together. I'm living my purpose, both in the church and in the marketplace and through our businesses. I love what I do. I'm living my best life, and it's all because of Christ. It's all because He loved me when I was at my lowest, and I told Him I hate you, and He told me I love you. And so what's in my heart is now that will is for God's purpose. Right. And Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, not through Ray. Yeah. Ray can't do all things. I couldn't do the most important things, which was people. Right? And so through Christ, I can do all things.
And one of those things that we didn't have a chance to talk about, the Way World Outreach, in that new relationship and this new perspective and this new vision, those why and your desire to help people really birthed into an amazing community economic development corporation called Cityway, which is underneath the umbrella of the Way World Outreach. And now you are exponentially helping, training, overseeing just multiple, if I could even use this terminology, fingers into the community, helping businesses, helping people, from just getting jobs to training to all kinds of, all your past history of the education part. It's kind of like on steroids now, right? I mean, it's just really, you've got this palette of all these needs, and then we got an army of people with Cityway that are just helping meet those needs and letting them experience this new life in Christ and training them up and helping them. So tell us a little bit about Cityway and what you do there.
Well, Cityway was birthed out of a vision God had given me in the midst of my being church hurt. I had gotten the vision, build a sustainable and replicable model to help the Rays of the world that grew up without that home support, that financial support, broken homes, poverty, breaking those things. And so Cityway, I shared it with Pastor Marco as I was restored and I came into the church. My purpose came back. I got connected to the employment ministry at the Way, and I said, I got this vision that was given to me so many years ago, I believe by God. And I shared it with Pastor Janet, Pastor Marco. Pastor Marco said, let's do it. And what Cityway is all about is reaching back into the community and the church and being able to help them understand their value and their purpose, and that if Ray can do this, anybody can do it. And so it works around employment. First step in mine was getting a job and providing for my family. But then after employment, it was, how do I grow into a career, right? And God opened the door. I looked back, and it definitely was God, into a career path. And then I started to give to my community. And so from employment, I got some education on the job. I took, little classes, seminars. So employment, education, and then I was able to start giving back to my community. I became a soccer coach. I became a youth probation officer. I volunteered with the youth accountability boards. I wanted to give back to my community. So Cityway is about employment. Right. Cityway is about education. Cityway is about community. And then the door opened for the entrepreneurial in Ray's life. Right. And if Ray can learn it, right, anybody can learn it. And so Cityway is about entrepreneurial growth. And then along the way, economic development. So investing. Right. Ray, now we've been able to invest in some properties as a family with my partners, been able to invest in businesses. And again, if Ray can start investing, why can't we teach others? And then when we invest in a community, economic development happens because businesses start to thrive. People start to become homeowners, and we create a community economy that supports a community. So that's what Cityway is all about, is employment, education, community, entrepreneurial, and economic development for a community. And the instruction was build it sustainable. We're a nonprofit, but as we built it, it's grants and donations will be a bonus. We built it off a service model. Right. And then build it replicable. If we can do it here in San Bernardino and build a model that helps this community, we can share it with any community throughout the United States or the world. Yeah.
So there's one last thing. Is just recently you were designated, or you accepted, I should say, the responsibility of being the president of the Downtown Neighborhood Association of the City of San Bernardino, which is the major part down there. And now your love for the city that you've had, now you're in a place where you're really strategically in a place to revitalize those businesses down there, make something happen. Where as Cityway is trying to help these small businesses, thrive. Promoting people to do business in San Bernardino, and basically just bring San Bernardino back. God's in the restoration business. Yes. Not only is He restored, but He's restored you. He's restored me. He wants to do it also in all aspects of life. And so if you're watching today, I really think we need to close out with I think Ray's story and everything that he's gone through. And like we said earlier, the hero of my story and the hero of Ray's story is the same. It's Jesus Christ. We were both in pits of a lot of it was no fault of our own, and others, we did have the shovel and we dug him deep, and we made a lot of bad choices. But when we cried out to him, he did pull us out. And I think if you're watching today, and if you feel like you're a little bit of a pit, I'm just going to have Ray just say a few words to you and pray with you, and that today might be your day to get pulled out of your situation, and let us get you on a solid rock, and let's redirect and reestablish your goings, and may you have a new song in your mouth from this day forward. So Ray, would just look at the camera and just lead them into prayer.
Yeah, I guess my prayer would be this, is that first of all, you know that how valuable you are to God and how much he loves you, and that he created you for a purpose. And no matter what life throws at you, that doesn't change your value, his love, and that you have a purpose. And that you will reach out to us if you want to talk. You'll go to a church. You'll seek the Lord. Ask him to make himself real to you. So as we close out in prayer, I thank you, first of all, Father God. I thank you for bringing me here. I thank you for allowing me to share what you've done in my life. I pray you would touch people on the other side of this camera. They would feel your presence. They would feel the love you feel towards them. They would learn the value you have on them. What you did on that cross demonstrated our value. And they will understand that you want to save them and you want to give them a rich and satisfying life, and that you have a plan and purpose for them. And while business is good, there's things that business can't solve, but God can. So we thank you and we praise you in the name of Jesus. And we say, amen.
Well, I'll close this out. So thank you for spending some time with us at Business by the Book. This is Ray Blom's podcast, and thanks for allowing me to interview you today and to find out your story. Thanks for sharing your why and why it is that you're doing this. And I know you're going to have a lot of great guests coming in the future, and we're going to be able to learn a lot from them. So thank you for saying yes to the Holy Spirit and starting this podcast. And may every aspect of where this video goes, may it touch and transform lives wherever it goes. Thank you so much for being with us today. Have a blessed day.